Chapter 3. As they drew up in front of Alliance Arms, she started having second thoughts. There was a strange history between herself and Bruja, and Kayla was more than a little apprehensive. "What's wrong?" Shinji asked. "Do you know if this chip is linked with my account?" Kayla asked. She couldn't even begin to explain to him what the real problem was. She knew full well that an account had come with her new identity but hadn't been told any of the specifics. "Naturally," he said. "It should have been listed on the RFI 60.228 form under personal account." He seemed to sense her confusion. "The replacement ID request. You did provide an account number, didn't you?" "I have people that take care of those kinds of things for me," she said. "So, I really don't know what to expect." "We'll just have to check when we get in," Shinji said as he finished parking the car. Her delay tactic hadn't been very effective. In terms of raw power, Bruja's psionic abilities were roughly equal to her own, but the other woman was specialized and far more experienced. Kayla chuckled quietly to herself. She was on her way to negotiate with a tradeswoman, not some adversary prepared for a duel. Shinji interrupted her thoughts with a rapid series of telepathic probes which didn't seem to have the intent of breaching her mental defenses. "What was that?" Kayla asked. "You were somewhere else for a minute there," he grinned. "I was just knocking on your mind to get your attention." "It's nothing important," she sighed. "I'm just feeling a little unsure of myself. I already have armor, even if it doesn't fit as well as I'd like. I should probably check in with Gao Rune before dealing with this." The confusion emanating from him startled her. "Gao Rune, you know, the leader of the first branch of Project Acorn, and local alliance liaison." "Nobody told you," Shinji was troubled. His thoughts were delicate like a whisper. Korbajani refused to relinquish his authority, and they don't have anyone here that's willing, or strong enough, to oppose him. She struggled to force down her internal rage as she said, "It looks like I'll need a very special suit. Let's get moving." Shinji got out of the car and was briskly walking around the front when she opened her door and got out. He frowned. "I was going to open that for you." "Sorry," Kayla said with a faint smile. "I'll try to be more patient next time." Kayla paused once they reached the entrance. She was still apprehensive. Shinji opened the door for her. "After you, Lady Darkseid." "Thank you," she said as she stepped through the door, and headed down a long flight of stairs to the main floor of the new store. This was far from the small shop she'd visited before. There were rows and rows of armor, sorted by species and alliance group affiliation. A vast assortment of weapons hung on the walls. It looked like it had once been a warehouse. On the left side of the building there was a long counter where the staff was hard at work processing orders. Bruja was nowhere to be seen. There were terminals lining the right wall where customers could check their accounts and enter in orders for later retrieval. Kayla headed over to one of the terminals and waved her forearm in front of the display. Nothing happened. "It needs to be a little closer," Shinji said softly as he held out his thumb and forefinger to indicate approximate distance. "Like this?" she asked as she moved a little closer and tried again. "You're nowhere near the sensor," Shinji said while trying not to smile. "I'm guessing you haven't used this brand of tech before?" "I always use the disposables," Kayla blushed. "Do you mind?" he asked as he stepped close and reached for her arm. "Go ahead," a faint tone sounded as he held her arm next to the terminal. "Only about 5,000, Kayla grumbled as she looked at the display. "Only," Shinji whispered in a voice full of awe. Kayla looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Yes, only." Shinji blinked at her in disbelief. "You do know that's gal creds, not credits." She double-checked the screen. She'd accepted her new station without any clue what it actually entailed. As far as anyone knew, Lady Darkseid was a person, not a title. It was a little awkward, at times. She felt like an imposter. Kayla shrugged dismissively to keep up appearances. Even at the current exchange rate, it was an insane amount of money. Several of the workers by the counter were arguing over which of them should welcome her to the store. From what Kayla could pick up with a combination of telepathy and her enhanced senses, store policy was for customers to be greeted by the staff member of either the same species as the customer, or as close as possible. "Come on," Kayla said with a sigh as she started walking over toward the counter. Shinji silently followed behind her, one step to her left. The shop girls' argument halted abruptly, and they rushed in front of the counter and stood in a line, waiting to see who she spoke to first. "I think they gave up on trying to figure out my species," she thought to Shinji with amusement. "Maybe I should tell them, just to cause even more confusion." "So, there is an actual answer?" he inquired. "Watch their faces," Kayla said, as she let her tails uncoil from her thighs and waist. Shinji struggled not to laugh as the women gawked at her. It was time to accept responsibility for her actions, and face Bruja. "Would one of you ladies mind running and getting Bruja for me?" Kayla said with a playful smile. "I need custom work with a master's touch." While the row of Terran hybrids looked on in confusion, a young Cheshire rushed into the back room. "Leave it to the feline," Kayla said with a chuckle. Moments later Bruja flung the office door open, sprinted into the main room, stopping dead in her tracks as she saw Kayla. Kayla was relieved that Bruja looked like she had when they had first met. Acorn must have used the cloning facility at Farpoint to make her a replacement body. They probably arranged to provide her with a replacement body long before sending Kayla to the ancient Eldero's seat of power. Her death on the ancient Elderon homeworld must have been foretold by Labarth. His ability to predict the future tended to be frighteningly accurate. He must have expected the part of her which had been Kayla to die on the ancient Elderon homeworld, but he'd been wrong about a few key events prior to and after Kivaz's arrival. The tenuous fusion of the two souls within her was hard enough for her to understand, never mind explain. Lady Darkseid tilted her head as she studied the shapely raven-haired woman. Actually, she looked younger than she had when they'd first met. For a moment she wondered if the woman had somehow recognized her. If anyone was likely to recognize the consciousness within her, it was Bruja. The very core of their beings had touched momentarily during the soul transference which had been performed on them. Although it had been years ago from the perspective of Kivaz's timeline, it had only been about 6 months for Bruja and the original Kayla. Granted, it wasn't her body that the other woman had borrowed. "Not her," Bruja said, crestfallen. "Is there a problem?" Kayla asked. "Just one," Bruja said as she turned to glare at the Cheshire. "A certain little kitty needs to learn to count." The Cheshire was in the processes of slinking along the back wall, toward the back door. "Aya," Bruja said in a steely tone, "come here." The Cheshire slowly, sheepishly, approached Bruja. "Yes, mistress." Bruja held her arm in the direction of Kayla, with her palm facing the ceiling as she reprimanded the Cheshire. "How many tails does this woman have?" "3, Aya answered nervously. Bruja lowered her arm. "What color are her tails?" Bruja spoke to the Cheshire with a stern yet compassionate voice, as she gently scratched the cat-like woman behind the ears. "Black and tan," Aya answered happily. "Very good," Bruja said as she moved her hand higher, and rubbed Aya's left ear. "That's right." The gray-furred Cheshire began to purr softly. Bruja yanked hard on Aya's left ear. The woman screeched in pain. "And how many tails were you told to watch for?" 6 dark green tails, the line of women all said in unison. "I'm sorry, mistress," Aya whimpered. Bruja released the feline's ear and turned her attention to her new customers. Kayla shifted awkwardly. "I really am sorry about that," Bruja said with a warm smile. "Please, allow me to personally welcome you to Alliance Arms." She turned and glanced at one of the women who was standing in the lineup behind her. Kayla watched a telepathic message pass between them. "Really?" Bruja said with delight. Her brilliant blue eyes shone in stark contrast with her raven hair. The woman really was stunning. She was Shamfarian just like. Kayla looked at Shinji with disapproval. Close your mouth, and stop staring. I didn't, Shinji objected. I mean I wasn't. I mean. Bruja burst out laughing. See what I have to put up with, Kayla said with an exaggerated sigh. Bruja cleared her throat, as I was saying. Lady Darkseid, please allow me to personally welcome you to Alliance Arms. I'll be happy to see to any needs you may have. Kayla smiled at the subtle emphasis she'd placed on the word any. How did you know who I am? Kayla asked. The terminal notified us when you were scanned. Shinji was still trying to apologize. Courtesy of her unique eyes, Kayla could see things in ways others could not. The ability which Bruja was using was visible to her as a fine purple mist that seemed to diffuse into the air within a 10-foot radius. Shinji, Kayla snapped, stop being foolish, you're not in trouble. He began. She is a lovely woman, Kayla said with a smile. Vorshana has impeccable taste. A wave of confusion seemed to pass through the room. You are certainly a beauty as well, Bruja said with a distant look in her eyes, but you're not her. Not even close, Kayla said with a broad grin. Shinji's emotional state shifted slightly. This is not the time to jump to my defense, Kayla thought to him teasingly. He blushed. Kayla clapped her hands together to startle Bruja away from her inner thoughts. I need new armor. This no longer suits me. Then there's a matter of my new assistant. I can't have him traipsing around in that security outfit. I don't want to give people the wrong idea. Imagine if people were to get the impression that I'm favoring one alliance group over the others. That certainly would be a problem, Bruja agreed. Well, if it's armor you need, Bruja continued with a smile, I'll just have to take personal charge of your request. I do have a very deep understanding of the rather unique needs involved with Leica physiology. Kayla fought the urge to giggle at the slight emphasis she put on the words, very deep. Nobody else seemed to notice the subtle flirtation. I appreciate your willingness to take a hands-on approach, Kayla said with a slight smile. My workshop is this way, Bruja motioned to the back of the store with a broad sweeping gesture. Lead away, Kayla said as she approached Bruja. Shinji walked up behind Kayla. Bruja watched him with a whimsical look. Will he be joining us? I'm sure my assistants can get his measure. Initially, Kayla said with a smile. I do have rather particular requirements. Bruja studied her for a moment, then thought to her, shall we discuss the matter for a moment while he waits here? Kayla grinned broadly, Shinji, wait here. I'll have them call for you in a moment. Aya, Bruja ordered, come along. The Cheshire followed close behind as Bruja led Kayla into her private workshop. Tools and materials were strewn haphazardly on shelves and tables throughout the room. There were mirrors strategically placed on the right side of the room with a small round platform in the center. Bruja walked over to a long workbench on the left side of the workshop, pulled one of the stools out from underneath it and sat down. Please, have a seat, she said as she motioned to another stool alongside the bench. Kayla repositioned the stool and flipped her tails to one side as she sat down. Aya stood just inside the thick curtain which separated the workroom from the rest of the store. New toy, or potential partner? Bruja asked bluntly. What? Kayla said with surprise. Let's not be coy, Bruja teased. He seemed to expect to follow you into a room where he knew you'd be undressing. Well, unless he's a complete idiot. Kayla said, I let him keep me company in the decon stall at Port Liberty. Really? Bruja grinned. That's pretty bold. No, Kayla objected, we didn't. I just wanted to show off my new look and... Well. So, you bonded recently, Bruja inquired, and your shifted form is new, am I right? I'm not actually a Leica, Kayla said swiftly. I just unlocked formerly inactive parts of my genome. That's what I get for underestimating Lady Darkseid, Broha chuckled. Care to tell me what species are included in this unlocked genome of yours? Kayla grinned as she resisted the impulse to answer. Under one condition. What would that be? Turn off that beguiling ability of yours and switch to truth detection. Broha pouted slightly. How did you know? What was that about underestimating me? Broha laughed heartily. The purple energy flow halted. Kayla whispered to Broha's mind, Dareth, Shamfarian, Lamentic, Gyron. Broha's eyes widened as she thought, I can sense you're leaving something out. Two things, actually, but a lady must have her secrets. Broha put on her best pout. Please, the curiosity is killing me, just one more? Kayla glanced over at Aya. As was typical for Cheshire, the woman was distracted by some shiny bauble on the counter. Kayla walked over to Broha, moved her mouth next to the woman's ear and whispered, Cletharian. Broha nearly jumped out of her seat. Really? Did you sense a lie? No, but... Really? Kayla nodded as her black tail raised in front of her and displayed its stinger. That stinger isn't normal, but are they essentially Gyron tails other than that? Kayla nodded as she sat back down on her stool. Gyron armor builds require a specialist. Do you need them accounted for in the build? I don't use them like a Gyron, Kayla noted. I'd imagine not, Broha said approvingly. Due to the variance in thickness and length, it would be a real challenge to try to make armor appropriate for your tails. The best I can do is make sure there's a spot to feed them through, like I would for a Cheshire. Kayla glanced over at Aya. There was a small round opening in the back of her armor, allowing her tail to swish back and forth unprotected. Actually, Kayla said, I'd like to have the option to cover them when they're at rest. An extra bit of armor to cover where they attach on my back, and maybe a fold on each leg for me to slide them under. Oh, and a skirt to slide the black one under. Are you looking for something like what you're wearing now? Broha asked uncomfortably. No, I need something that fits and provides full protection, Kayla said, then added, and a second outfit to show off. Broha sighed with relief. That's good to hear. No offense, but it looks a bit more like fetish wear than proper armor. What kind of hide is that? Zanril, Kayla answered. Never heard of it, Broha grumbled. What kind of protection does it provide? Superior against piercing and slashing, Kayla said with a chuckle, but useless for anything else. With that combat glaze of yours, and a lining to reinforce it against bludgeoning attacks, it would be fantastic. It's really hard to work with. It can only be with crystalline tools with a hardness of at least 9 on the Mohs scale. Ruby or sapphire should do the trick, Broha said as she jotted down some notes on a pad she'd taken from her pocket. I'd have the cost of the tools to work it. No problem. It doesn't look like there's enough there for the build you described, she asked. Do you have extra hide available? No, Kayla said, I had something else in mind for the old suit. Broha flashed her a quizzical glance. For your new friend? Kayla blushed. Yes. I assume you're after a look that's more conventional and a bit less. Sex dungeon. Kayla burst out laughing. It's not that bad. Broha smiled and shrugged. So, you said something about showing off your new look, Broha said with a sly grin. Did your new friend reciprocate or was it one-sided? Kayla studied Broha. You're scheming, aren't you? Would you mind if I brought some of the girls in for the fitting? Broha said with a devious sparkle in her eyes. I'll have the Udbar watch the front just in case we get any hominid customers in. We'll bring back our Lamentic girl and all our Terran hybrid ladies as well. You called them ladies, except Lamentic, why? Have you ever met one that was? Kayla giggled. So, I'll have them assist with taking your measurements, and then we can take his. Broha grinned. I assume you'll want to be present while we size him for his suit. Do you take measurements while the client is naked? Broha smiled. No, but it does make for a better fit. We can make do without. Were you planning on having all those other women in here with him? That's entirely your choice, Broha was grinning broadly. Well, unless you want to give him a say in the matter. I'm not sure, Kayla said softly. It's partially a matter of how you feel about him being touched by a bunch of strange women. There's nothing sexual about it, but it can give you a glimpse of who they really are. Kayla bit her lip as she took a moment to think it over. I really don't know him well enough yet. I've found it's best not to take dangerous chances without being sure of the likely outcome. You may have a point, Broha said with an exaggerated sigh. There are things combat empathy doesn't help with. Thank you for understanding, Kayla said. So, I'm guessing he's not the manly man sort that would jump at the idea of having women fawning over him. He's actually a bit shy, Kayla countered. He even thanked me after I stripped for him. Broha considered her words before responding. If you don't mind a little advice, woman to woman. Be careful. You never know what the shy ones will be like after you get them out of their shells. I'll try to keep that in mind, Kayla said softly. Don't let me ruin your mood, Broha insisted. We're all broken in our own ways. Relationships are about trying to find someone else out there whose broken edges line up with yours, without jabbing one another with the pointy bits. That sounds a little pessimistic, Kayla quipped. Broha shrugged. It is what it is. Aya coughed. Well, let's get started, Broha said with a smile as she spun her chair to face the rounded platform in the middle of the room. Please undress and stand in the center of the platform. Kayla unstrapped her armor and laid it on the workbench. She felt a little uncomfortable under the scrutiny of the other woman. Aya, I'll have you take care of getting all the figures we'll need. Just treat her as you would a Cheshire, without all that weird rubbing against each other nonsense your people tend to do. Aya was gazing at Kayla with a strange intensity. What? Kayla snapped as the feline walked around her while studying her unblinkingly. You have such pretty stripes and tails, and you even have fuzzy places. Are you sure you're not some weird mutant Cheshire? Aya, Broha roared, stop gawking and do your job. The woman rushed over to a nearby shelf and grabbed a small cloth strap. Sorry, Broha said with annoyance. She really needs the training. Then again, you never really finished training Cheshire. After being scolded for playing with the strip of cloth, Aya went to work. Broha wrote down each number as the Cheshire called them out. One thing was certain, the armor was going to be form-fitting. What did you have in mind for? Kayla jumped back as Aya rubbed her cheek against her patch of fur. Aya, Broha snapped. Sorry, Aya said as she looked up at Kayla. It just looked so soft. Don't act like a cat, Broha snapped, that's not really her fur. Actually, it is, Kayla said with a blush. Seriously? Broha blinked in disbelief. Kayla nodded. And the bit by your hips? Kayla turned around and swished her tails, it connects in back. So then, Broha observed, you're not wearing any undergarments? Kayla stared at the floor, red-faced, as her black tail moved between her thighs and wrapped itself around her waist. Aya, Broha said with a faint laugh, please go and ask Kiryu to come back here for a minute. Aya rushed through the curtain. Let's hope she doesn't get distracted on the way, the raven-haired woman scoffed. A rather short Cayman woman stepped through the curtain and said, You called, mistress? I need a favor, Kiryu. I need you to go and pick up undergarments appropriate for our guest here. Specifically, traditional Cayman season wear. Kayla blushed. Are you sure they'll work? Kiryu asked. Cayman woman parts tend to be back a little further. Take a look at the sizing we just did. She's a little further forward, but she doesn't need the front covered, so I think season wear should be the closest thing available to fit her physiology. I hope she's not tag sensitive, because it's going to have to be a large, Kiryu said as she looked over the figures Bruja had written down earlier. Tag sensitive, Kayla asked, allergic reactions? Some women get their tails in a twist over the size listed on the tag, Kiryu explained. I can think of better reasons to twirl my tails, Kayla snickered. I think a narrow large should do the trick, Kiryu said with a faint smile. Let me write that down so she knows what to look for later, Bruja said. Thank you, Kiryu, you're a real lifesaver. I know plenty about armor, but not a damn thing about Cayman underwear sizes. I'd be a little concerned if you did, Kiryu giggled. I'm surprised you know anything about season wear. I've seen it, and I asked. It led to an awkward conversation. Bruja smiled, I tend to remember things like that. The Cayman laughed so hard she nearly barked. I'd bet it was a little more than awkward. Bruja nodded enthusiastically. Kiryu turned to Kayla and asked, do you have a color or style preference? Bruja answered, something suitable for Lady Darkseid. Reimburse yourself out of petty cash. Something sexy. It's season wear, Kiryu scoffed. It's meant to be practical. You'll have to settle for light and comfortable. I'll try to match the color of her fur. I'll be back as quick as I can. Thanks, Kiryu, Bruja called after her as she left the room. What season wear? Kayla asked. It's what Cayman women wear when they're in season. When they're fertile, everything down there swells up, so they wear an extra layer for comfort. Kayla's eyes widened. Oh, so that's why it was such a big deal. Where did that damn Cheshire get off to? Bruja grumbled as she walked over and looked through the curtain. Get back here. Kayla shook her head and giggled. While I think of it, did you actually want to show off your stripes? About that, Kayla said. All I have is that one suit of armor. I was hoping to get a second set for more casual wear. The custom work will take a few days, so we'll set you up with something you can wear home. Refitting your old armor for your friend will take some time as well, due to the tailoring requirements. Keeping all that in mind, what were you thinking for casual armor? It will have to be something we can pull of a rack and adjust in as needed. I want something that will let me really show off my stripes, and pants that won't get in the way of my tails. Did you have any specific materials in mind for the pants? Kayla grinned, Talgradon scale, with the glaze. There are better materials, Bruja asked, why Talgradon? I want to look like I'm wearing Corbajani's hide. Planning on starting a quarrel with the old Chalig? Kayla flashed Bruja a toothy grin. Maybe. Bruja tore a piece of paper off of her pad and wrote something down. Mistress, Aya said from the other side of the curtain. Bruja passed her the note. This is what we need, and don't dally. You're having a Cheshire get something shiny? She'll be fine, Bruja said dismissively. Now, give me a few minutes to think about how to keep you protected while showing off those stripes. It's not going to be easy. I'm concerned with showing off, Kayla admitted. I can compensate with Kobe-Tonge. Vanity wear? Kayla was confused. It's armor that's made to accentuate, not protect. Exactly. It can get pricey, Bruja cautioned. I need to keep it around 1k galcreds for expenses, which will leave me 4k for play money. Should I care about prices? Only if you wanted to get stupid about it, Bruja said with a smile, but I don't sell that useless gem-encrusted junk here. I'd never get it away from Aya. So, basically an armored bra? Can you do that? Can I? Bruja balked. What color? Kayla traced the stripe of fur on her right hip. Wait here, Bruja said. I have an idea. I'll be right back. While she was waiting, Aya returned with a pair of pre-glazed Talberdon hide pants, with an open-topped loop in the for her tails to rest in. Lady Darkseid, Aya asked, are you sure you want? Bruja knows best, Kayla said with a shrug. I just wanted to make sure you're comfortable with the top of your hips being uncovered. That's fine, Kayla said as she took the pants from her. Kayla slid on the pants and waited while Aya adjusted it to conform to her legs, while remaining comfortable. Bruja returned. A silvery-haired, black-skinned, Dareth girl followed close behind her. They were both carrying a wide variety of armor pieces. We have options, the raven-haired woman said as she started sorting through the piles. Thank you, Jika. That will be all for now. Mistress, the Dareth said and then left without another word. After she'd finished sorting the garments, Bruja said, these are just for vanity's sake. This stack is armored, and a little something special. All done, Aya said. Thank you, Aya, Bruja said. You can return to the sales floor now. How special? Kayla asked. Well, it's insanely expensive, extremely rare, and transparent. It's armor, but useless against blunt damage. It's nearly impossible to pierce or cut. That's why I bought it. Unfortunately, it conducts heat, light, and electricity like nobody's business. I wish I knew about that before I bought it. I don't think so. I spend a lot of time manipulating fire and electricity, Kayla said. Well, it was a thought, Bruja said with a sigh. I'm not quite ready to admit that it was a bad investment. Oh well. Just take a look through them and take your pick. I did find something that's a close match to your fur. It's just a soft leather bra with black fur. I sure wouldn't call it armor, but it will match with those thin lines of fur on your hips. I'll take the bra, Kayla said. Mistress, Kiryu said from the other side of the curtain. Oh, you're back already? The Cayman held a bag through the curtain. I wasn't sure what style Lady Darkseid would prefer, so I picked the three that seemed most appropriate. Bruja took the bag and tossed it to Kayla. Pick one and try it on. The fabric covers just where you'd think, and the straps go up over your hips. Now, about your friend. Do you want his armor loose or tight-fitting? The thing about Zanril hide, Kayla explained, the tighter the hide is pulled, the more protection it provides. Kayla took off her new pants and tried on the new undergarments. Really? Bruja said with a quirky smile. And you want it adjusted for someone who's shy? That's a good point, Kayla admitted. I'll hold on to the old suit for later, and just get him something that will complement the suit you're making me. Kayla slid her pants back on. Bruja stuck her head through the curtain and called for Jika, then returned her attention to Kayla. So, Bruja asked, mutaphasic regenerative biofiber for him as well? Kayla looked at her in confusion. I don't remember agreeing to that. I just assumed, Bruja said. You do have the money, and it is the best. Granted, yours will be double reinforced with extra protection where it's needed most. That's the benefit of custom builds. Kayla tried on the black furred leather bra. Let me help you with that, Bruja said as she took hold of the leather straps and tied them behind Kayla's back. That's the downside of this piece, Bruja said. You may need help getting it on and off. I assume that won't be a problem for you. Kayla giggled. I sure hope not. How can I help you, mistress? Jika said through the curtain. Can you get her friend's basic measurements and bring him and a suit of MPRB back here? What color? Bruja looked at Kayla's old armor. Should I use your old suit as a guide? Kayla nodded. The deep gray. Yes, mistress, the black-skinned woman replied. Thank you, Jika, Bruja said. They're all so polite, Kayla noted. When you require your staff to call you mistress, it comes naturally. Kayla sat back on the stool, gathered up her old armor, and put it in the bag with spare underwear. A few moments later Jika returned with Shinji, who was holding a suit of armor in his arms. Kayla smiled. Dareth women consider men to be inferior, so it was only natural she had made him carry it. Her mother, Valk, would have done the same thing. It's culturally ingrained, and not given much thought. Bruja dismissed Jika and instructed Shinji to step up onto the platform. Yes, ma'am, he answered nervously. He stepped up onto the platform and turned to face them. As he saw Kayla, he dropped the armor and stood motionlessly staring at her. I think he likes your casual suit, Bruja said in a hushed tone. Are you sure? Kayla teased. He hasn't said anything yet. It's all the skin, Bruja chuckled. Don't expect the same when you're wearing your custom suit. Then again, I've found less revealing can be more stimulating. You look. Wow, Shinji said. Kayla blushed. We'll just be doing a quick fitting today, Bruja said. Please change into the armor and let me know when you're ready. I'll be standing just outside. Kayla glared at the raven-haired woman for setting her up like this. Bruja stepped through the curtain and winked at Kayla as she let the heavy material close behind her. This wasn't my idea, Kayla said urgently. Please don't be angry. I'll just go and wait outside. Shinji was confused. What wasn't your idea? Kayla turned her head to the side and blushed, bringing you in here to undress for me. I'm not sure what the big deal is, Shinji scoffed. I have worn shorts and gone shirtless in public. What about your? Kayla motioned toward him. I am wearing boxers, Shinji laughed quietly. I'm not that easily embarrassed. She was originally planning on bringing all the ladies in here to take your measurements, Kayla said pointedly. No, he said uncomfortably. That would have been a little much. Be thankful it's a quick fitting, Kayla teased. For a full custom fitting they make you strip completely. So, all that time you were back here naked? Most of it. I'm sorry I missed it. Kayla scowled, way to make it about you. I just meant. Kayla smirked, you meant what? I like looking at you, he said meekly. Kayla pouted. This isn't fair. How can I make it up to you? Kayla grinned surreptitiously, you could strip for me. Here. I thought you said it wasn't a big deal. Not if I'm still wearing my boxers. I may be a bit of a voyeur, but that doesn't mean I'm an exhibitionist, too. Kayla looked down at the floor and said, I'm sorry, I was just teasing. He walked over and pulled up a stool and sat right next to her, so close they were almost touching. I didn't mean to upset you, Kayla said nervously. Lady Darkseid, Shinji said, I may have assumed a few things about you when you were so willing to undress for me. Kayla began to panic. She had no idea what he was going to say or what impression she may have given. She enjoyed having him around, was attracted to him, wanted him, enjoyed his attention and the intensity of his desire. She had even wondered if. Shinji cleared his throat loudly. Sorry, Kayla said with a weak smile, I was lost in thought. Loudly, he answered with a playful smile. Kayla flushed with embarrassment and buried her face in her hands. Lady Darkseid, Shinji said, there is a question I need to know the answer to. Kayla spread her fingers and looked at him through the gap. What question? He whispered the question into her mind. Have you ever been with anyone, dating, relationship, sex, anything? Panic gripped at her. He was also a telepath, he'd know if she lied, but would her answer change what he thought of her? No, she whispered fearfully. He breathed a sigh of relief, okay, now I understand. Thank you for answering. His response had baffled her. She lowered her hands and wondered what he meant. Stay right here, Shinji said with a strange excitement in his voice. Okay. He leaned forward and kissed her on the forehead, then rushed to the center of the platform. What are you doing? Kayla said in shock, as he started taking off his clothing with all the exaggerated dramatic flair he could muster. This wasn't simply undressing. He was trying to put on a show, just for her. She felt incredibly embarrassed, but this was what she asked for. Once he'd stripped down to his boxers, he turned to her, grinned and said, "Maybe later." Kayla quietly, playfully, booed him as he put on the new suit of armor. "If you calm down and stop overthinking everything," Shinji said quietly, "I'll tell you a secret when we get back in the car. Okay?" Kayla nodded slowly. "We're ready in here," he said loudly. Kayla sat and watched quietly as Bruja made adjustments to the fit of his armor. Shinji and Bruja were talking back and forth telepathically throughout the process, but Kayla decided not to insert herself into their conversation. There was a clear difference between stepping into a conversation to gain a tactical benefit and invading someone's privacy. However, as Bruja knelt next to him and they started thinking back and forth, the curiosity got the better of her. She reached out to take a quick peek and retreated immediately, feeling terribly embarrassed. He was asking her to tighten it up more around his hips because Lady Darkseid liked his, wanted to enhance her viewing pleasure. She let herself get jealous, even when she knew better. Bruja, being Dodgemare, had no interest in men. Once the refitting was finished, he turned his back to Kayla and asked, "Do you approve?" Kayla looked to Bruja. "Do I have to pay extra for an ass that firm?" "Not when it comes pre-installed," Bruja said, and then burst out laughing. After being led to the front counter, Kayla waited impatiently as they calculated the bill. She decided to pay in advance for the custom work and didn't even attempt to haggle. She had plenty of time and wanted to get out to the car as fast as possible. Shinji had promised to tell her a secret and she wanted to know what it was. "Before you go, do you need anything else?" Bruja asked, "like weapons?" "I left my sword and dagger on the shuttle," Kayla said dismissively. "I'll bring them in to have sheaths made later." The majority of the staff lined up at the door while Bruja finalized the transaction. She rushed by them with a forced smile as they thanked her for shopping with them. The moment they were out the door, she was in such a rush she nearly dragged Shinji to the car. He pulled away from her once they reached the car, insisted on opening the door, and took his time closing it once she'd gotten in. He sauntered around to his side. Kayla made sure his door was unlocked. Shinji took his time opening the door and slowly sat down. Kayla shut his door with telekinesis to prevent him from wasting any more time. "Why the rush?" Shinji asked with a broad grin. Kayla swung her body toward him as her black tail reached past him and hit the chair. Release. Her left tail pushed his chair back as far as it could, and her right tail shoved the steering stick forward as far as it could go. She straddled him with her legs and looked into his eyes while grabbing him by the shoulders and shaking him. "What's the secret?" she said desperately. "Tell me." Shinji laughed. "In what reality can this, in any way, be considered calm?" Kayla leaned back, with her hands still gripping his shoulders. "I can think of 3, she said with a vicious grin. "One in which I don't kill you for taunting me, a second in which you hope to have any chance to share my bed, and a third world in which you like being able to get me this worked up over offering to tell me a secret. Aren't those all the same world? Just tell me." He grinned and shook his head. "First, answer me a question. Did you snoop in on the conversation I had with the armorer?" "No," Kayla said, then blushed brightly. "Maybe a little." "And what did you overhear?" "That you wanted to look good for me." Kayla bit her lip. Shinji blushed. "Anything else?" "No," Kayla said and then started shaking him again while chanting. "Tell me." "Okay, I'll tell you," he said through gales of laughter. "What is it?" Kayla whispered. "I'm not normally shy. It's you." Kayla rolled her hips forward so she could lean back a little further. "What do you mean it's me?" "Women don't make me blush, you do." Kayla blinked and teased, "Are you saying I'm not a woman?" Oh, come on, he objected, I'm trying to be serious. You're famous, brilliant, exotic, and the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Kayla pouted. That's very sweet. Even if it's not entirely true. Lady Darkseid, Shinji said forcefully, that's not fair. I saw a speech Mistress Kaylani gave after the alliance was formed. That doesn't count. She's the most beautiful woman to everyone that ever sees her, no matter what race they are. That's just what makes her Kaylani. But, you know what? She didn't make me blush. You do. Her eyes felt warm and damp. I mean it. It's just something about you. He grinned broadly. You make me feel like a little kid who's just met their first childhood crush. She rolled her hips forward, moving closer to him. You're very sweet, Kayla said softly as she looked deeply into his eyes. I'm even willing to forgive you for that lie, but only because it's not fair to compare anyone with Mistress Kaylani. You're right, it's not fair to hold something like that against you. He grabbed hold of her arms as she started to move away. Kayla looked at him with surprise. What, is there more? Just one more thing, Shinji said with a sheepish grin. What is it? Kayla asked. She felt nervous and vulnerable. It's not fair to sit on me like this, he said with a faint blush. Not unless you let me kiss you. Do you think you deserve one? She said as she rolled her hips back and leaned away from him. She paused, with surprise and confusion. She rolled her hips forward slightly, then back again. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. Oh, Kayla said, as her hips rolled back again, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I didn't mean to. I'm going back to my side of the car now. That may be for the best, Shinji said as he tried to shift his position while pinned under her hips. Do you still want that kiss? Kayla asked. I'm not sure that would be safe at the moment, Shinji blushed brightly. Should I send you back in to have your armor readjusted? I'll be fine. Just get off me and give me a couple minutes. Kayla returned to her side of the car, carefully. Her heart was racing. She couldn't seem to stop blushing and was smiling so wide it made her face hurt a little.